Humanity was on the brink of destruction the moment portals tore open in the sky. Monsters flooded into the world, turning every corner of the city into a nightmare. Amid the chaos, a young orphan knelt frozen as he watched his teacher's head trapped in the grip of a monstrous claw. Her lifeless body hit the ground with a dull thud. The boy couldn't move, couldn't scream, only stare as horror unfolded before his eyes. Then, the beast's massive claw clamped onto his own head. Death felt so close, so inevitable. But before it could happen, a sharp sound cut through the air, a sword, slicing the monster clean in one stroke. Through the dazzling light, a warrior stood tall, unshaken, unstoppable, like a hero straight out of legend. That day, the boy cried. Not just because he survived, but because something inside him had ignited, a desperate desire to become strong, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Years passed. The boy trained relentlessly, fought tirelessly, survived everything thrown at him. But when the moment finally came to prove himself, he failed. Every bit of strength he had gathered wasn't enough. Reality hit him hard. He was still too weak. The sun hung high at its peak, drenching the battlefield in golden light, a vast wasteland now littered with the corpses of hundreds of dragons. Amid the sea of scaled giants, a lone man sat atop the head of the eldest dragon. He was the only one left standing, having slain them all with a single sword. A system window flickered to life in midair, confirming the ancient dragon nest had been wiped out. But despite the overwhelming achievement, there was no sense of pride in him. Shin Sang-hyun, a swordsman who had dedicated more than 30 years of his life to martial arts, was now 55. A lifetime spent on the battlefield had only earned him the rank of 100th among the greatest swordsmen. He leapt down from the dragon's head, gripping his dungeon reward, a skill book. He prepared to absorb the artifact. Then, a flash of blinding blue light erupted behind him. His constellation had arrived. Bloomer model student, his contracted constellation, greeted him, its presence warm yet unyielding. It delivered a nearly impossible demand. To activate its first effect, Shin had to reach level 850. That would double all artifact and title stats he owned. But the second effect, the one that would multiply his stats exponentially, required him to hit level 900. Unfortunately, despite decades of relentless struggle, he had only managed to reach level 650, a feat already beyond ordinary human limits. Shin stared at the skillbook in his hand. He attempted to absorb it using his unique ability, Artifact Devourer, his very first skill since awakening. But mastering it had been anything but simple. At one point, he had tried boiling artifacts, eating them raw, even frying them. None of it had worked. It took him 30 years to finally unlock mana synchronization. Blue energy engulfed his body as he channeled mana into the skillbook, but the result was disappointing. It wasn't compatible. Frustrated, he hurled the book to the ground. There was no time for regret. Bloomer, his constellation, remained silent. It understood the weight of Shin's life, his struggles, his lack of knowledge about Devourer, and offered a quiet apology. But Shin didn't blame anyone. There was nothing to blame. Just a life steeped in failure and regret. He closed his eyes, recalling the hero who once saved him, the legend who made him pick up a sword in the first place. But now, in his fading years, his body had weakened, his breath had grown heavy, and the strength he once took pride in had become nothing more than a fleeting memory. If only time could turn back. If only I could be young again. As despair swallowed him whole, Bloomer simply smiled. His constellation gazed at him with quiet fondness, and without a word, activated its power. Before Shin could comprehend what was happening, his vision blurred. The world around him began to shift. Reality twisted. Time unraveled. And the last thing he saw was the reflection of himself, 55 years old, on the brink of rewriting history. Shin found himself knocked back in time, 30 whole years to be exact. His body might now be only 25, but his mind was loaded with decades of swordsmanship know-how. The very next day, while idly watching TV, he caught a news segment where a reporter was grilling a woman about bizarre dungeons and interdimensional gateways. That was his cue. This was no time for chilling out. With a bit of flair, he whipped out his trusty dagger and swung it in the air a few times. The blade, called Venomoth, gleamed even though it was made from scrap metal, a bronze-level weapon really. Yet Shin knew there was more to it than met the eye. He activated his signature skill, Devourer, a process that siphoned artifact power straight into his system. Sure, given the weapon's low tier, He only nabbed a 10% boost, but that wasn't the main deal. The weapon also hid a secret skill that you simply can't get the usual way. In that moment, his body was pulled into a weird, extra-dimensional space, a kind of subconscious void you had to pass through every time you swallowed an artifact. And out of nowhere, a meal appeared in front of him. This time it was a welcome surprise. A whole roasted chicken drizzled with warm olive oil, a serious upgrade from the bug-in unknown creature, chow he'd been forced to gulp down in the past. He attacked it with zero hesitation, each bite lighting up his taste buds like a flavor explosion. As the absorption process kicked in, he permanently ganked +2 agility. He also unlocked a hidden skill, Demon Bash. In one swift move, the power of the dagger merged completely into him, and Venomoth faded away, merging with his very being. With a deep, satisfied exhale, Shin reemerged in the real world, collapsing back onto his sofa. Mission 1. Totally accomplished. Now it was time to put these new powers to the test in actual combat. The scene then shifts to the front of a dungeon, where a ragtag group of players and porters had gathered. A subtle hum of magical energy buzzed in the air. Amid the bustling crowd, the head porter approached the team leader with a worried look, delivering the news that Shin Songhyun had apparently bailed on the expedition. But the team leader just smirked coolly and casually revealed that Shin had now joined the ranks as a player. The porter was left speechless, staring in disbelief. It had only been 4 days since Shin had awakened, and already he was barging into the dungeon as a player, flipping the rulebook that demanded newbies go through academy training first. When the porter tried to sound off about the risks, the team leader brushed it off like it was nothing, insisting that matters like contributions and distribution were trivial. Disappointed and exasperated, the head porter stormed off. One of the players couldn't help but ask, why the hell did the team leader even accept Shin in the first place? With a sly chuckle, the leader explained that if Shin ended up kicking the bucket inside the dungeon, at least the porters would finally learn to keep quiet and give the players their due respect. Moments later, a calm Shin approached, silently confirming that from that point forward, he was a bona fide player. The porters shot him icy, contemptuous glares, while the players greeted him with wry, sarcastic smiles. Everything unfolded just as Shin had predicted. The team leader, who'd been betting that Shin would be late to his first raid, made it clear he expected nothing less. Then the leader's eyes fell on the longsword strapped to Shin's back. With a raised eyebrow, he questioned why Shin had opted for that weapon. In a matter-of-fact tone, Shin replied he'd picked it up from online videos. The team leader burst into hearty laughter, as if mastering a longsword, one of the trickiest weapons out there, was something only a total noob would attempt. Then the raid kicked off. One by one, the players and porters marched through the gateway, leaving the familiar behind as they dove headfirst into the dungeon realm. The team leader couldn't help but shoot a mocking glance over his shoulder at Shin, convinced that picking up dungeon skills purely from the internet was a colossal rookie mistake. In his mind, Shin wouldn't last more than a few minutes in an orc nest, a place that even veteran players would dread. He was sure Shin was about to get a rude awakening about how weak he actually was. But just a moment later, that smug, cynical look on the leader's face turned into pure, dumbfounded shock. There stood Shin, completely alone, surrounded by a pile of dead monsters. His longsword was drenched in orc blood. Giant orc carcasses lay scattered around him, completely lifeless. The other players were absolutely dumbfounded. Orcs are usually seen as the standard early-game baddies in video games, novels, and fantasy flicks, a checkpoint before the real big bosses like dragons or demons make their entrance. Many dismiss them as mere muscle-bound brutes who rely solely on raw strength, lacking any tactical finesse. But trust me, the reality is far more brutal. Towering at an average of 250 centimeters and weighing around 180 kilograms, these beasts are the ultimate trial for any rookie. No wonder they've earned the moniker, the Wall of New Beast, a veritable death trap waiting to pounce on any cocky, careless newcomer. Just moments before the battle broke out, the player team crept cautiously down the narrow dungeon corridors. The magical aura mixed with the stench of monsters weighed on them, making every step a calculated risk. One of the players shot a cold glance at Shin, a stark reminder that this world doesn't hand out freebies to newbies. No special treatment here. If he goes down, it's all on him. The porter leader wasn't holding back his irritation either. In his eyes, Shin had leveled up way too fast. Less than a week into his awakening as an awakener, and he was already calling himself a player. But Shin just smiled and coolly replied that he'd do his best. Of course, his good intentions were met with a chorus of jeers. Shin voluntarily stepped up, offering to lead the charge if any monsters showed their ugly faces. A bold move that got some teammates thinking he was totally off his rocker. Out of nowhere, a monstrous roar echoed from behind them. Shin was quick to grab his sword and prepare to strike, but before he could, another player dove in first, trying to hold off the beast while throwing shade at Shin for being too slow and using a sword that was frankly too bulky. Their bickering, however, left an opening. The orc hoisted its axe and swung it with full force at the player who had challenged Shin. His face went white as he realized, in a split second, there was no way to dodge that hit. Right at that moment, a massive shield came crashing in from the side. The team leader charged in, parrying the attack until the orc staggered back. He didn't waste a beat, yelling for everyone to stop the petty squabbles and focus on the enemy. His quick reaction earned instant nods from the rest of the crew. Taking charge, the team leader ordered everyone to hang back as he faced the orc head-on. He raised his shield to soak up the hit while his sword plunged straight into the monster's chest. Green blood splattered everywhere, yet the orc just grinned, still standing as if nothing really mattered. Almost immediately, a giant axe swung through the air, nearly clipping the leader, barely missing his face by inches. From a distance, Shin watched the brawl with keen interest. Sure, the team leader was the strongest in the group, but at level 50 he still struggled to score a critical hit on a lone orc. The clash raged on until the leader finally put it all on the line with one decisive strike. With pinpoint precision, his blade pierced the orc's heart. The massive beast shuddered before finally crumpling to the ground. The players cheered softly, admiring the win, though their joy was as fleeting as it was cautious. Then, from deep within the dungeon, a thunderous sound rattled the corridors. The earth trembled and a deadly aura seeped out from the darkest passage. Out of the shadows emerged 6 more orcs, but these weren't your everyday brutes. They were bigger, faster, their eyes glowing red, and one of them was decked out in full battle armor, a bona fide high orc. Tension gripped the team. Several players took a step back, suddenly realizing that this fight wasn't going to be a cakewalk. Yet, in the midst of all the chaos, Shin stood firm, his eyes locked on the battlefield. To him, this wasn't a threat, it was a chance to prove himself. The team leader warned Shin not to go charging in recklessly. But without a second thought, Shin bolted straight ahead, ready to face whatever came his way. With one smooth, clean swing of his sword, he split the first orc in half, no extra force or hesitation anywhere in his wrist. An angry roar erupted from the remaining orcs as their hulking bodies barreled forward like a violent storm. Unfazed, Shin strode into the fray, slicing through 3 orcs in quick succession. He targeted the weak spots, a precision only years of battlefield experience could hone, not something a rookie would even dream of. One orc swung its axe straight at his head, but with an almost imperceptible twist, Shin narrowly dodged the attack, and then literally cleaved the monster's head in a vertical stroke. Now, only one enemy remained, a high orc clad in armor. This wasn't just any high orc, it was bigger, stronger, and its sword was powerful enough to shatter the ground with every swing. Shin jumped up and tried to cut its neck, but his strike came in too shallow. The orc spun around, its sword whirling toward Shin, and in an instant, everyone thought he was as good as dead. Then, miraculously, the orc's sword halted right in front of Shin's throat. The beast froze mid-swing, its entire body paralyzed and its eyes bulging in disbelief. Without wasting any time, Shin acted. In one lightning-fast motion, he chopped the creature's neck, severing it cleanly from its body. The armored head rolled over and landed right at the feet of his teammates. Silence, the kind of eerie stillness that makes you question reality, descended over the battlefield. Everyone watched in stunned silence as the level 1 rookie obliterated the high orc force and now stood, wide-eyed and blood-splattered, as the undeniable victor. Even the battle-hardened veterans couldn't mimic what he'd just done. Someone finally murmured the name of the skill he'd just unleashed, Hindrance. What blew everyone's mind even more was its duration. Among the elite players, the highest recorded duration for Hindrance was only 1.5 seconds, yet Shin's skill clocked in at more than 2 seconds. The activation was flawless, clean, and without an ounce of error. The team leader slowly approached, trying to wrap his head around what he'd seen. Meeting his gaze coolly, Shin confirmed his identity without a hint of doubt. When asked if the skill was really the result of his awakening, Shin answered with absolute confidence. The leader just couldn't buy it. No way such a potent skill could stem solely from an awakening. To prove his point, Shin urged the leader to inspect his sword. There was no hidden artifact, no extra enchantment, just a plain, ordinary weapon. Demon Bash was purely Shin's own doing. In that moment, the leader's heart churned with envy, awe, and a touch of fear. After 2 long years of dungeon crawling and reaching level 50, he had never seen anything like this before. Out of nowhere, one of the players screamed, announcing the arrival of the middle boss. The team leader nodded and barked out orders to move forward, but before they advanced a step, he turned to Shin, reminding him that the skill he'd just pulled wasn't enough to tackle the middle boss. Shin only offered a slight smile and a confident nod. Deep down, though, he wasn't there just to throw punches. He was determined to reclaim something he'd once lost. In a calm, almost nonchalant tone, Shin tossed out a question that instantly shifted the mood. If he could take down the middle boss on his own, could he claim all the artifacts it dropped? A heavy silence followed. The team leader stared at him as if weighing the proposal, while the other players exchanged looks, suddenly aware of just how high the stakes were. There was an unwritten rule among them. Whoever lands the final blow gets the artifact. And Shin knew. The middle boss might just drop Crimson Stun, that legendary artifact only ever snagged from a demon orc. This wasn't just a battle of brute strength, it was a clash of ambition. In a past life, Shin had only ever watched from afar as other teams managed to get their hands on that stone. The Crimson Stun, so rare it had nearly turned into a myth. He understood its power completely. This was the only skill in the world that could delay an enemy's movements, giving its owner the upper hand in battle. The silence grew even thicker, as if the entire room were holding its breath, waiting for the leader's decision. All eyes fell on Shin, the level 1 kid who dared to challenge the middle boss solo. To everyone else, it wasn't just arrogance, it was borderline madness. Finally, the team leader broke the silence. He gave his reluctant nod, but only on the condition that their current strategy failed. Shin replied with a barely perceptible nod, loaded with meaning. A small, secretive smile played on his lips. The break he'd been waiting for had finally arrived. The boss room door creaked open slowly, and a blast of icy air billowed out, a chill that slithered like the breath of death in the dark. In the vast, dimly lit chamber stood a monstrous figure that would send shivers down anyone's spine, the bloodthirsty demon orc. The team sprang into action, flanking the beast and getting ready to pounce from every angle. Their captain led with unwavering confidence, sure that the battle would wrap up in minutes and that Shin wouldn't even stand a chance. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything went to hell. The captain's body crumpled onto the floor, blood dripping from his forehead. His vision blurred as he trembled, watching the demon orc, which hadn't even fully mobilized, loom menacingly. The team's formation shattered, chaos erupted, and terror began to grip them all. From behind, Shin let out a quiet sigh. Once again, they'd acted too hastily. When the captain finally realized his mistake and ordered a retreat, Shin stepped forward. The captain shot him a tired, cautionary look. If Shin went down, nobody would be left to pick up the pieces. Shin only glanced over briefly, a slight smile curving his lips. He wasn't going to die. Not today. The demon orc roared. It charged at Shin, axe raised high, ready to cleave the small figure in front of it. Just as the weapon came crashing down, Shin lifted his greatsword and blocked the blow. The impact rattled the room with a deafening crash, yet he stood firm. The orc paused, studying Shin like he was watching a live demo. Slowly, Shin stepped forward, lowering his sword to the side as his eyes locked onto one thing: the crimson stun embedded in the monster's chest. That glowing red stone was the key to the hidden skill delay. If he could merge it with his demon bash, then infinite stun, the ultimate move, would be his. The monster bellowed and launched another attack. But this time, Shin was lightning fast. His slash found its mark on the orc's right arm, striking its weak spot. The huge axe slipped from its grip and crashed onto the floor with a heavy thud. Without wasting any time, Shin activated Demon Bash. The orc's body went rigid, frozen in place. The captain could only watch in wide-eyed disbelief, unable to fathom what he was seeing. Shin expected his stun to work. Still, the opening it created was short-lived. In a split second, the demon orc counterattacked, slamming its massive leg into Shin. Shin parried with his sword, but the sheer force of the blow was overwhelming. His body was sent flying several meters, dragging through the dirt and leaving a long trail before he crashed hard against a stone wall. Shin had to get back on his feet, and this time, there was no room for a second error. To add insult to injury, the orc had a regeneration ability. The wounds it had just sustained had already closed up, its flesh knitting itself back together as if nothing had happened. The demon orc roared once more and charged again. Shin didn't have a moment to think. With his stun on cooldown, there was only one option left: kill it now. Shin blocked it with perfect precision, then stepped back, using his momentum to maintain a safe distance. Not a trace of panic crossed his face. If you can't beat them with your own strength, use their strength against them. Wait for the right moment, scout out the opening, and hit that vital spot with precision. In one crisp, calculated move, Shin shattered the orc's axe with a precise slash. Then, moving like a man possessed, he closed in and plunged his sword straight into the orc's chest, right at its heart. The monster snarled. Its body trembled before collapsing with a heavy thud that reverberated around the room. A notification chimed in his mind, but Shin remained expressionless. You've leveled up twice and earned the new title, Demon Hunter, rank E. The rest of the team slowly gathered around, their eyes wide, shocked, and struggling to process what they'd just witnessed. Meanwhile, Shin greeted them with an odd, knowing smile, a mix of exhaustion and guarded secrets. To keep the chatter down, he began playing up the notion that the battle had been brutal. He shifted his stance, catching his breath, and feigned signs of fatigue. In a quiet tone, he mumbled that it was the captain's previous attack that had weakened the orc. The players' focus shifted immediately. They turned to the captain, showering him with praise and gratitude. The captain, bewildered and confused by the unfolding chaos, just stood there, his eyes meeting Shin's in a heavy, wordless exchange. Without uttering a single word, Shin communicated a silent warning through his gaze, a subtle reminder for the captain to maintain his honor. The captain gave a slight nod, then shifted his attention to the glowing red stone embedded in the orc's chest, recalling the promise he'd made. With a firm, commanding voice, he ordered the team to gear up for the final boss. In no time at all, the players rushed up the stairs, leaving Shin alone in the now quiet room. Once everyone had cleared out, Shin walked up to the crimson stun crystal like it owed him money, and kicked off the absorption process. Yeah, things got weird fast. His consciousness started fading, like slipping into sleep on a Monday morning. And what greets him there? A steaming bowl of noodles, stacked with meat and eggs, looking like it was crafted by a god-tier chef. Without hesitation, Shin sat down like it was Thanksgiving dinner and started slurping away. A voice popped into the silence, confirming what he'd already figured out. Crimson Stun, fully absorbed. Strength and vitality went up by 2 points, and he unlocked a shiny new skill, Delay. Energy flowed through his body like he just downed 3 cans of Monster. As the power settled in, he immediately linked Delay to his other skill, Demon Bash. As his awareness returned, his status window popped open. And yup, his theory was now cold, hard fact. Right on cue, the captain walked over, announcing that they'd reached the final boss room, Orc Berserker. Shin gave a casual nod, as if silently saying he'd catch up. But the captain wasn't having it. He extended his hand, making it clear, this battle had to be a team effort, no exceptions. Shin agreed, grasping the captain's hand, but not without setting his terms. The boss's artifact had to be his. The captain didn't even hesitate before sealing the deal. Just then, a player stepped forward, reporting that the squad was ready. He shot Shin a glare so sharp it felt like he had just stolen his lunch money. The animosity was unmistakable. Shin could sense the murderous intent behind that stare, but he chose to ignore it.